Hi, I'm Kels from My Thermomix Adventures. I'm going to show you an apple and cinnamon cake in my Thermomix. It's not a cookie dough recipe, and I will put the full recipe on my blog on mythermomixadventures.com. So let's get started. First of all, I use these little sort of Teflon liners. It's an 8-inch tin, and I've buttered the sides and just sprinkled some flour around so that it will come out nice and easily. You can use a springform tin if you prefer. And I've pre-weighed some of my ingredients. You obviously have weighing scales in your Thermomix. If you want to access the weighing scales in your Thermomix, pop the lid on without the measuring cup so that you've got a flat surface, and then swipe across your screen to access your functions. And at the top on mine, although it might be in a different place on yours, but on the top left on mine are scales. You pop an empty bowl on top, or whatever you want to weigh into, and then you press tear to go to 0, and that way you can access the scales on your Thermomix outside of a cookie dough recipe. I've toasted some pecans. You can use untoasted, but by toasting them you get a slightly nicer flavour and a little bit crispier, which I quite like the crunch in the cake of the nuts. So I'm going to put all of these in. Pecans in my local supermarket come in bags of 100 grams. I like to use a little bit more than that, but if you want to just buy one bag, just put in 100 grams. I like to do about 120 in this cake, but it's perfectly fine. Go for a 100 gram bag and then you're not buying 2 bags and not using it all. So I'm going to go to the main screen on my Thermomix. So that's the 3 dials, and I want 2 seconds speed 4. So I just set 2 seconds by tapping on the time dial, and then I'm going to turn it to speed 4 with the lid on and the measuring cup because it's likely to jump up a little bit. And speed 4. Okay, nice and quick. To stop the ping, you can push the dial or you can tap the screen and that'll stop it. All that's done is lightly chopped them. Okay, you could do that with a knife, but much quicker in your Thermomix. We're going to put them in a bowl and set aside. And don't worry about the residue in your bowl. You're going to be using this in your cake anyway. So I'm putting that aside for later. Next up, we're going to have light brown sugar, butter, flour, baking powder, and cinnamon, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, 100 grams of maple syrup, and 3 eggs. I'm now going to mix that 30 seconds, speed 5. Okay, that's stopped mixing now, so touch my screen, it'll stop the sound, or push the button. Let's have a look what we've got. I'm going to scrape down the sides. Now, when you're trying to sort of scrape off that last little bit from your spatula, and naturally we want to sort of bang it on the edge just to get that last bit off. Because your scales are in the feet, I always recommend lifting up your bowl before you bang, okay? You wouldn't bang something hard onto normal electronic scales, so don't do it with your Thermomix. So just lift up the bowl, give it a bang, and then pop it back down, rather than banging on the edge while it's on the Thermomix, because that could damage your scale. So just look after your scale. Next up, we've got apples. I got these from Waitrose. They're called Smitten apples. I sometimes use Pink Ladies. I sometimes use Golden Delicious, whatever I've got in the house. Granny Smiths are quite good because they're a little bit more tart. I quite like the sweet apples in my cake. You could use baking apple if you want to, but I prefer eating apple. So these are quite little. I've used 3 of these. Either use 2 really big apples or 3 sort of small to medium size apples. I quite like having a bit more apple in my cake because it gives a little bit of moisture to it. So I'm just going to tell you how much in weight I've got going in there. So I've got 208 grams, so that's 3 small apples. That gives you a guide of what I've got there. Okay, that's then going to have a little mix on reverse. Okay, so there's your time, temperature, speed, and you just tap that to access reverse. and I want 30 seconds and speed 3. And I can see reverse is enabled there. There we go. That's our batter ready. Little tip, to get that last bit of batter that's stuck on the blades, I'm going to put it back on my Thermomix for 10 seconds, speed 10, or actually I tend to just turn it up to speed 10 and listen for when the sound changes, and it's going to throw everything off the blade. So I'm just going to do that now and I'll show you. So look, it's all gone off your blades, and it's much easier now to scrape out. Always go in a clockwise motion, then you're going against the blunt blades. And look at that, I've got all that extra now. Top with pecans. I've got the pecans on top, and I like to top with a little bit of brown sugar. I'm just using Demerara just to give a little extra crunch on top. I'm going to pop my sensor in this so that it will tell me when it's ready, and 45 minutes roughly, 160 fan or 180 if it's non-fan. So there you go, ready to go in. Hi, so you can hear the sensor has told me that it's now ready. So I'll press confirm. It says remove from heat. Let's have a look what it looks like. There we go. Then I'll take the sensor out. It is going to be hot. Okay, leave that to cool, and then I'm going to turn it out and serve.
Go.
So ideally you use a springform tin so that you can just push up the base, but I didn't have one, so I'm going to just flip it. The reason for that is you've got lots of nuts on top that are going to fall out when you flip it. So let's see if this comes out nicely. There we go. That shake. Just okay. There we go. Now I've got to flip it again, so I'm going to get another plate just to flip it over, and maybe on a tray so I catch those nuts and I can put them back on top. Plate underneath. I'm going to just have the tray over where I'm going to flip it. I don't need the kitchen towel anymore, so let's just put it there. Let's put that in the centre, and 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay. Let's just get those bits of nuts on top. Just clean up the edges. So you can imagine a springform tin would be much easier, but I didn't have one handy. This here, if you can zoom in, this here is where the sensor was. So just pop a couple of nuts, and you can't even tell that that has a little indent there. So that's our cake. And then let's just pour those extra bits of nuts on top. Let's cut into this and see what it's looking like.